Welcome to you all. Welcome back if you were with us yesterday, and welcome to you for the first time if you're just joining us for this second day of this conference. For those who didn't meet me yesterday, my name is John Davis, and I'm Chief Executive of the CPA UK, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association UK, and it's our great pleasure to be hosting this conference with our partners in the Modern Slavery and Human Rights Policy and Evidence Centre. For those of you who were involved yesterday, thank you so much for the energy and engagement you brought to this event in this unusual format. But thank you so much for your engagement. And for those of you who weren't, very much look forward to that same level of engagement, expertise and commitment from you all today, which I'm sure we'll have. To give you a sense of the numbers involved, I think as I was coming into this meeting, I think we already had over 100 people registered again today or attending today, and we were up to around 140, 150 people yesterday. So from 25, 30 different places around the world. So thank you so much to you all. That's who you're in this event with. Without further ado, if I may, I will now hand over to Murray Hunt, who is the Director of the Modern Slavery Policy and Evidence Centre. Murray, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, John, and good morning to everybody. My name is Murray Hunt. I'm the Director of the Policy and Evidence Centre on Modern Slavery and Human Rights. And some of you saw me yesterday, but I realise that we'll have some new delegates joining us today. Welcome to you all. Thank you all, first of all, very much indeed for all your contributions to yesterday's conference, which I thought was a huge success from our point of view. The speakers were excellent, the substantive content was excellent, but in particular, you, the delegates, I felt, were very participative. We had a lot of very good conversations in the breakout sessions, and I'm really grateful to you all for the contributions that you've made. The takeaway for me from the day was the enormous challenge which you've posed to us, the Policy and Evidence Centre, about how we can actually give life to our aspiration to be inclusive and to make sure that there's meaningful participation on the part of those people who are directly affected by modern slavery. It's very easy to espouse these ambitions and aspirations in a vague way, but we really need to put some flesh on the bones to do that. And we had a number of challenges yesterday which were thrown down very explicitly for us to try and do that. And we will, I hope, be able to rise to that challenge. I wanted to say, for those of you who didn't hear me yesterday, just a few words about the nature of the Policy and Evidence Centre, the key things about the Policy and Evidence Centre that I'd like just to get across. The first of those is that we want the Evidence Centre to have a real impact in the real world. We are very ambitious about what the Policy and Evidence Centre can achieve, and we want it to be transformational, both in terms of our understanding about modern slavery and also in terms of the effectiveness of the laws and policies which are designed to respond to it and to prevent it in the future. So aspiring to have a transformative impact is really in the DNA of the Policy and Evidence Centre. The second key feature of the centre is that it will be grounded in high quality, independent research. That research will be world-beating, we hope, in quality. We hope it will also be independent, impartial, non-partisan, and able to appeal to a broad range of people who are engaged on these important issues. It will also be very much focused on human rights. It's a modern slavery and human rights policy and evidence centre, and that is intended to signify that we put the dignity and the rights of the people who are directly affected by modern slavery at the heart of everything that the centre does. So the human rights focus of the centre's work is extremely important to us. Another of the key features of the centre is that it aspires to be collaborative and inclusive, and that it does, as I've said at the beginning, want to go beyond merely spouting that as a vague aspiration. We want to actually live that as a reality in the way in which the centre works. We want to bring together in an inclusive way all the stakeholders who are working on modern slavery across the world. We want to bring them together in new ways, in ways that brings in participants who aren't necessarily directly involved in these conversations at the moment. And we aspire to try and create and to bring into being over time a network of the various networks globally which exist in this important area. So my question I want to just pose is, how can you all get involved? in the work of the Policy and Evidence Centre? There are a number of ways. First of all, I can encourage you to all go to the new Policy and Evidence Centre website and to explore there exactly what we're doing, what our plans are, and also there to sign up for our newsletter so that you can keep in touch with the Policy and Evidence Centre and receive regular updates about its work. I'd also like to encourage you all proactively to respond to our current consultation on what our research priorities should be. You'll find that online on the website. There's a short survey. We'd very much like you all to take part in it. We'd also very much like you all to put out to your networks encouragement to them to also take part in filling out that survey. We'd also, in the context of the conference, want to encourage you all to use the Miro whiteboard, which is in the chat box, pinned to the chat box, where you can leave post-it notes, the equivalent of post-it notes, with your ideas about what the centre ought to be prioritising, what are the big research questions which it needs to be addressing in order to deliver its ambition of having a transformational impact. And finally, we'd also like to encourage you all further to our aspiration to bring into being a network of networks, to use the networking space in the conference. The networking space gives you an opportunity to meet others assigned randomly who are also attending the conference for a 3-minute conversation. And we would very much like more people to be using that facility. So I'll end there. We're very fortunate to be joined in this session by Dame Sarah Thornton, the Independent Anti-Slavery Commissioner, who has been a great friend of the Policy and Evidence Centre, and she very much shares the aspirations and the ambitions for the centre that I've set out. So I wish you all a very successful day and looking forward to taking as much away from it as I did yesterday. Thank you very much.
My great pleasure to introduce Dame Sarah Thornton, who is the United Kingdom's Independent Anti-Slavery Commissioner, and you saw her there on the video. It would be an understatement to say that Sarah has been a great supporter of the work that we've done at CPA UK, of the centre as it's got off the ground. Indeed, she's been more than that. She's been very much a driving force on this and other work in the UK and beyond on modern slavery. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you very much, John, and hello to everybody. I'm really delighted to join you at this international conference on assisting and protecting survivors of modern slavery, human trafficking and labour exploitation. And can I say congratulations to the Policy and Evidence Centre and the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association for bringing together so many people from across the world to join for the next couple of days. I've been asked to speak about incorporating survivor voices, which, as you saw in that video, is something that I feel very strongly about. And I thought I might talk about 3 different areas: listening to survivor voices. Then I'll talk a little bit about embedding survivor voices into policy and practice. And lastly, about ethical representation of survivors in the media. So in terms of listening to survivor views, spending time doing that is a really essential part of my role, and one that I find to be hugely important and informative. Of course, COVID-19 means that I'm really missing face-to-face contact. And sadly, at the moment, contact is just virtual, but it still remains a really important part of the role. And when I speak to survivors, I'm struck by their courage and strength, despite often having suffered the most appalling abuses. And it always reminds me that it's important to understand that there is no typical victim of modern slavery, and each individual survivor will have a unique experience and a unique viewpoint. And while in the UK, we are identifying more victims of modern slavery and we're protecting them, there are still too many weaknesses in the system. And we need to do so much more globally to ensure that those who've suffered this most egregious criminal act are supported to become survivors. And by that, I mean leading lives of sustainable independence, doing the sorts of things that most of us would just take for granted. And listening to survivors has made me passionate about the need for access to work, for access to education. Digital enablement is absolutely key, mental health support and decent accommodation. And we need to ensure that the needs and perspectives of survivors inform policy at governmental and local level, but also practice, with survivor agency actually shaping the schemes which will support them towards recovery. I'm also struck as a former police officer that survivor voices are so important in the criminal justice system. And I know how hard it is to give evidence against abusers, and we need to do so much to ensure witnesses are supported. But I have been really impressed by the work of some charities and NGOs who work with victims, not just in the UK, but across the world, to give them confidence to come forward and to trust criminal justice systems. Earlier in the year, I was talking to a survivor who'd been a victim of extremely severe labour exploitation for many years. And when he spoke to me about giving evidence in the court, it was so clear how important that was to him in terms of his dignity and his agency. The second thing I wanted to talk about was embedding survivor voices in policy and practice. I recently published a review which we carried out in collaboration with a Partnership for Conflict, Crime and Security Research. And we'd examined the evidence base for work on survivor support and the extent to which that is informing both policy and practice in the United Kingdom. A part of my role I see as building bridges between the researchers, the evidence producers, and those either in practice or as in policy making who will use that evidence. And I found that while there is quite a lot of academic research, it's not always informing policy and practice in the way that it needs to, and in the way I think that would provide best support for survivors. The review challenged us all to think about the way research is undertaken, how it's received and how it's implemented. And we called for a collaboration between the research producers and the research users of understanding, respect and collaboration, really, really important if we are going to support victims and survivors on their road to long-term recovery. And lastly, I just wanted to touch on something that I mentioned in that short video clip about the importance of ethical representation of survivors, both in our work and I think importantly in the media. While I understand, of course, all of us do, the power of a human story, my office doesn't put survivors directly in touch with the media because we're really concerned about re-traumatization, but we also don't want survivors' experiences to be commoditized or misrepresented, or people kind of unwittingly tell a survivor's story on their behalf. And one of the things that, the small things that we've done is we are a signatory to Freedom United's My Dignity, My Story pledge. And I would actively encourage media reporting that represents survivors with dignity and agency. So finally, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. And I hope the rest of the day is informative, but I hope it also challenges all of you to do more to eradicate the exploitation of our fellow human beings. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you. And indeed, good luck for your own launch tomorrow. I think it's the launch tomorrow of your own annual report. So I'm sure people will be looking out for that as well. So thank you again.